Hey guys, it's good to see you. Welcome to Intro to Literature. Now, literature is only the stuff that was written down. And so, I want you to think about the long-term history of humanity, where we've lived more than 200,000 years, and things only started getting written down 6,000 years ago. You should take notes on this. By the way, my name is Warren Parkin, and I am happy to teach you literature. I want you to call me Warren. I don't want Mr. and I don't want Sir. If you want to talk to Mr. Parkin, my dad is in Wasatch Lawn back in Salt Lake City, 6 feet under the ground, and he's been there for the last 20 years. So for you, and I know this breaks all the code here in the South, you call me Warren, not Mr. Warren and not Mr. Parkin. Alright, so anyway, humans have been around on this earth for a long damn time. More than 200,000 years. And for almost all of that, we had oral transmission of knowledge. And that means that writing and having literature is a brand new technology. And I understand if you think, really? Reading and writing is brand new tech? I had the latest iPhone. No. We're talking about only 6,000 years ago did things start getting written down. For example, the Bible did not start getting written down until 3,000 years ago. 3,000. Imagine that. That's when the Old Testament got written down. The New Testament got written down about 2 generations after Jesus' death, and until 4 or 5 generations afterwards. So we're talking about brand new. Anyway, so to start this class off, I want you to think about oral tradition. For example, the stories that are passed down in your family, just orally. The stories that people talk about. Hold on. I'm trying not to smoke on camera. So, for example, about a story that got passed down, my grandmother Parkin, the mother of my father, she's about 4 feet tall, and she came from Wales. She was an immigrant, and she liked to talk about different ways that she had harmed people in her life so that they didn't think they were better than her. For example, she worked on the Pullman cars. These are railroad cars, and it was a prestigious job, and it was good paying. And there was a guy there who was being very handsy. This is before the Me Too movement. And so she saw him being handsy with her very good friend. I don't remember what her name was. My grandmother's name was Elizabeth, by the way. And so what she did is she heated up a pot of tea and winked at her friend. And then she walked over to the guy who was being handsy, and she spilled a boiling pot of tea on his lap. She would like that. She would laugh after she said that. And then she'd also talk about things like, my neighbor's dog was getting into my yard, and it was doing its business. That's what she called it. Even though she spoke Welsh, she refused to speak Welsh, by the way. She knew English, and even when she went to her family reunions, she refused to speak Welsh to her family, who had emigrated with her. And she would say, I told her, if your dog comes into my yard again, you're going to be sorry. And then she would proudly say, and that dog the very next day came into my yard and did its business, and I scooped it up with a shovel, and I walked across the street, and I threw that inside their front room. And then she'd always say, and don't let anybody tell you they're better than you are. Obviously, she had an inferiority problem. But that's the kind of grandmother I had. I took my first girlfriend over to her house when I was 17, Lorene, and I introduced her to her, and she was very polite and brought us out a drink and a couple cookies because that's the tradition. And then she said, "Come here, come here." And so I walked through the dining room and back into, and this is a tiny house. I walked through the dining area and back into the kitchen, and she walked me back out on the back porch that had been screened in, and she's like, "Look at that." I'm like, "Look at what?" "Look at that." And there was a brand new fence that spanned the entire back. There was a wood fence, and it looked beautiful. And I said, "Oh, that looks great." And she says, "No, it doesn't. It looks like hell." And she was mad because the neighbor who paid for the entire thing hadn't talked to her about it. So, anyway, these are the kind of stories that get transmitted orally. This is how the Bible happened, was orally. This is how the Odyssey and the Iliad happened, was orally before they got written down. Oh, by the way, if you're looking in back of my head, I like rest art, which makes me strange too. But your first assignment is to write down a story that's passed along in your family. It doesn't have to go back to your grandmother or your great-grandfather or whoever. Just a story that gets told over and over and over again. Good to see you.